First of all, if you're even thinking of this, have you ever tested it, to Brad's point? Do you know what your VO2 max is? Do you know what a good VO2 max for your age is, and what a VO2 max that's sort of average and then below average? Where do you fit in that scale? What happens if you're a lot of it's genetically linked too. Some people just have a very good VO2 max just genetically. So let's say you went and tested it and your max is pretty good, just not work out.
Bringing you a reasoned approach to health and fitness. This is the Phi Life Podcast.
Welcome to the Phi Life Podcast. I'm John Barbin. With me is Brad Pilon, and we're posting this on the anniversary of Hot Rod's death. So we're honoring him with the t-shirt today.
Good shirt.
One of the all-time greats. All right. So, but the actual subject today is VO2 Max. It's been a few people have asked me about it. A lot of the fitness influencers are suggesting it's one of the main predictors of longevity or health span, maybe not living longer, but living healthier longer.
Right.
And they want to know, like, is this something they need to take seriously and add into their exercise routine?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I got some thoughts here, but what do you think? Like, right out
I think that it's a big movement too on the trend of being a hybrid athlete. So right now, the hybrid athlete trend is being able to, squat, bench, dead like a powerlifter, then go out and run a 5-mile run, right? So basically being both an endurance athlete and a strength athlete, it's funny because we're just kind of right back to even before CrossFit, it was cross training, right? Like that sort of idea. We're just back to that. And VO2 Max came into that. And I do use VO2 Max as a measurement of overall aerobic capacity, endurance in young athletes, but only as a marker of the guys who are fairly low. I want them a little bit higher. But the guys who are already really high, we can talk about all the measurements. It just tells me that that's not an area where if I can massively improve it, it's going to translate anywhere. So it's almost like there's a cutoff of like, you're good. And then anything really below that, you need to improve. And anything above that, you're good. Just maintain it, right? Because we've talked about, it's largely genetic. It has to do with just overall body fitness. So using it as an individual marker is odd because it's not influenced by just one thing.
Right. And so that's what I wanted to get to here. So the question came in from a few people, but there are people that are in their 40s or 50s and they're starting to think about longevity. What Brad was talking about is training much younger,
15-year-olds. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the express purpose of the results in their sport. Hockey.
Yeah.
Hockey is an intermittent style. If there is one sport that mimics HIIT training, it's hockey.
Yeah.
As soon as you're on the ice, it's a full-on sprint until you get off the ice for 30 to 45 seconds. If you're stuck on the ice longer than a minute, you're in trouble. You're not supposed to be out there that long.
Yeah.
Or you're conserving energy if you've been out that long. But if people aren't aware of hockey, they might even know that that's how short a shift is. Like you're just you're going once you're out there. So being able to recover really quickly and getting back out and going to max heart rate is that style of sport. And it's kind of how you'd expect. It mimics HIIT training, kind of like basketball. If you're playing like an up-tempo type of team, same thing. It's like sprint, a little bit of rest, sprint, a little bit of rest. I mean, both teams eventually have to take a rest. But anyways, back to
we're in a situation actually, just since we're on this, and why I find VO2 Max and intermittent sprinting so important is they're at the age group now where some of them are legit third or fourth liners, right? So it's more like sit for 6 minutes and then be asked to go out and like basically sprint around the ice for a good minute and then sit for 6 minutes again. And they have to be ready to go. So it's not only just recovery, but that ready to go aspect, which I think that, VO2 Max is interesting, but for me, it would be more what they can do on like an assault bike type of thing, or just actually best would be on the ice skating. But VO2 Max is more of it's not a sport thing right now. You and I are talking about though. It's people are interested in it for longevity and health span, right? Like these aren't 40-year-old hockey players trying to get back into shape.
No, so the questions I'm getting are from, like I said, 40 and 50-year-old people asking, is it important to put into their routine for the sake of health and longevity? So the way I would think about it is, how much are you already doing in your fitness routine? So how much weight training are you doing? How much of any cardiovascular training at any intensity level? So moderate, high, whatever. How much of all of that are you already doing? And let's say you do have a good routine. You like how much weight training you're doing and how it's affecting your body. You've got a cardio program built into place. Do you even have time or room to try something different?
Right.
Maybe
and then do you have a need, right? Do you know your VO2 max? Actually, shoot, we should probably define it first.
Right. Well, so VO2 max is the amount of oxygen you consume per kilogram of body weight per minute.
Right.
So, and now there's another measurement that's just how much oxygen you can consume full stop in a given time frame without it being associated with body weight. But that's a more complicated way to test it. You have to be in a lab and you have to be all hooked up where they actually collect all of your breath and
right.
measure it. So it's the other way is not as difficult. You can correlate it with heart rate on certain exercises, but the general rule is if you get lighter, your body weight just gets lighter. As per the one measurement that's body weight dependent, your VO2 max just will go up just because you're lighter.
Right.
So first of all, if you're even thinking of this, have you ever tested it, to Brad's point? Do you know what your VO2 max is? Do you know what a good VO2 max for your age is and what a VO2 max that's sort of average and then below average? Where do you fit in that scale? What happens if you're a lot of it's genetically linked too. Some people just have a very good VO2 max just genetically. So let's say you went and tested it and your max is pretty good, just not work out because you just have a good VO2 max. And is just genetically having a good VO2 max, is that correlated with age? Or is it only if people exercise their way into a better VO2 max?
Yeah, so that's a great point. That's almost in line with the grip strength work, right? Is grip strength is associated with health span and longevity. But the argument is that grip strength just a correlate of everything else, meaning you're a healthy person? Or would actually training just your grip, nothing else, so your grip improves, but nothing else does, would that improve longevity? So is VO2 max a marker of overall health? Or is it specifically your ability to consume oxygen per kilogram what's causing you to live longer and have a better life?
Right. Otherwise, what would you do? Just do HIIT training and then grab a gripper? And somehow that's going to make
you've nailed like 90% of it right there.
Stupid. That's not it. So yeah, they're proxies. Grip strength is a proxy for overall strength, and VO2 max is an indication of how much oxygen your body can consume per unit time and how much blood your heart can pump. Like that's kind of, which is, there's nothing wrong with it as a measurement. That's fine. But the question is, how much should you focus on it? First, another thing, is your current routine affecting VO2 max? You kind of have to go back and undo everything you've done and live some amount of your life without it to see where's your max without your current exercise routine. So is your current, it's one thing. Where are you right now? Do you know if it's affecting any amount of exercises doing better for VO2 max than zero?
Yes.
So some amount. So if you're exercising right now and you have a routine, some amount of what you're doing is affecting your VO2 max because you're actually exercising.
If you're elevating your heart rate or breathing a bit heavier, you're actually training your VO2 max to some degree.
To some degree. Yeah. The amount it can change seems to be genetically constrained. Some people can change as much as 40%. Some people can't budget more than 15%. Now, maybe that has something to do with where you start in the first place. I don't know. Maybe some of that data is correlated to the training status of the people being measured as well. So if you wanted to focus on training VO2 max and get it to move, you won't know how far your body can move it. So you might get a 10 or 20% bump and do all the training you could possibly do and wonder why isn't getting any better. But somebody else might get a 30 or 40% bump. And you might be thinking, how come I can't do that? Well, genetically, you might not be able to.
It's really not that much different from bench press, right? It's like some people will just train it and all of a sudden end up being able to bench press 400 pounds. It does not mean you and I would be able to do that. Now we can all improve our bench press, but I think was it Dr. Mark Turnipolsky at McMaster had a VO2 max of like 70 something. We have a kid on our hockey team who's like in the mid 60s, right? So these are just numbers that we would. There's no training program that you and I would ever do to get us up to those levels. Right now we can improve where we're at, to your point, but like, so it's a bit like benching that. You're going to start off either good or bad at it, and you're going to start off with the capacity to get really good at it or just kind of better. So
right.
Yeah.
So, and okay, so to expand the thought here, is it in line, if you're going to add in something for it, let's say HIIT training, let's say you already do weight training and you already do some amount of steady state cardio, and you don't, for some reason, you don't think that's enough, so you want to add more and you want to add some kind of interval training.
Yeah.
Is that still in line with your current goals, or are you taking something away to place the effort on that for the sake of this change in VO2 max? The other thought is whether or not you're 20 years old, 30 years old, 40, 50, 60 years old, and you're just kind of coming across this information online now, and you're seriously thinking, maybe I should do this. If somebody who's 60 years old who starts this now, you just passed it? You needed to have started this in your 30s. So how many decades of your life do you need to be at a good VO2 max for it to affect your longevity?
Okay. Yeah. I never even thought of that. So the duration of time spent of your life with a high VO2 max. So an example would be, let's say I spent most of my time with a VO2 max of 30, and 30's low. And then in a decade from now, so I'm almost 60, I decide, crap, I got to work on that. So I spend from 60 to 63 getting my VO2 max, and I'm a good responder. I get it up to 50, like a really good number. And it's there from age like 64 to 65. And then I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. And it goes right back down to 30. Did that little blip have any effect on my health span, longevity at all? Right. So, yeah. So it's how long, the duration of time you spend with a good VO2 max. Is that the important part? Or is it just peaking it at some point in your life?
Or is it a proxy for something else? Like, what if you were an endurance athlete in college and you spent part of high school and most of college and maybe a bit of your 30s, so the really good VO2 max, then you go your 40s and 50s with a lousy VO2 max, and then you start training however you train, and you measure it and you realize your max starts going up again. Is that just as good as someone who's never trained VO2 max, used to smoke, used to drink a lot, cut all of that out, and in their 50s started a workout program and really hit the interval training hard and push their max up? Like, what are we talking about here as far as the actual effect it might have on your longevity? And are you going to start this now and journal for the next 30 years? Like, how?
Yeah. The other thing is, again, to the chronology of that duration, does it matter? For instance, what if I had a really good VO2 max from age 10 to 25? I'm a high school, college, long distance runner, and then I don't after that. I'm always going to be slightly elevated because of that. Versus I picked it up later in life at 30, and from 30 to 55, I had a decent VO2 max. Is it what I developed with through those really key years of puberty and developing into an adult that mattered, or is it what I'm doing later in life? So that's another question, is the data, because again, we'll talk about, they'll be pulling from research studies and they'll be researching 22-year-old college kids as evidence that VO2 max is important, and then you're applying it to 50-year-olds? Or are we actually pulling data from 50-year-olds who didn't previously have a good VO2 max, but then all of a sudden developed one and they somehow lived longer? I don't know. I think it's just a surrogate endpoint for a good, healthy cardiovascular system and muscles that can take up a lot of oxygen.
Yeah, it might just be, it might be a good surrogate endpoint for capturing a lot of what you're doing, like capturing your entire fitness, I don't know, routine or history. Or
an active person of the same height and body weight will generally have a better VO2 max than a sedentary person of that same height and body weight. So yeah, could just be that.
That's a very good way to say it. So if that's, and same with grip strength, it doesn't mean you just do a gripper and somehow you live longer. It's a grip strength test is likely just a really good test for a proxy for how all of the strength training you're doing, and it likely means your whole body is stronger, which likely means your tendons and ligaments are a little bit more robust if you've been doing strength training enough to have strong hands, instead of testing all the different lifts. And we know that
it's actually a fantastic correlate for just upper body musculature and strength.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then when you get down, and I'm actually going to go do a VO2 max test. I have no idea what mine even is.
Oh, okay. Can you do something for me?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to hate it. So a Cooper test, I want you to run on a track for 12 minutes and see how far you can go in 12 minutes, how many laps of a 400-meter track. And that is supposed to, using an equation, be a very accurate estimated VO2 max. So if you can do that, like, I'd actually do it after your VO2 max so you don't get a training effect, but do your thing and do that, and then we can compare how that works.
Yeah. So my family doc's actually a sports med doc, and the clinic they have is linked to sports medicine and has all the testing facilities. So I'm going to ask him about this. Cool. But something people might not be aware of is your VO2 max is modality specific. So your max on a treadmill running is different than your max on a cycling, which is different if you can test max swimming. Like it's specific to the modality. So if you're even going to bother testing this, which modality? Then is the modality you use to test the same as how you train for it? So
I would imagine, that would matter a lot. So if I'm an overweight athlete and I'm an overweight guy, so I carry a lot of that in my trunk, then I would imagine cycling versus running would make a big difference.
Well, because you could destroy your joints if you're too heavy.
That's true. Yeah.
Like you just said, I should try this run test. I've been battling with plantar fasciitis.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. You're broken.
I might not even be able to do that, without just sidelining myself with the foot. So that's another consideration. If you're even going to do this, are you in condition enough to add in a high interval training style that all of your joints are ready for it? Your ankles, your hips, your knees, depending what age you are and what your training status is. Can you just start doing sprint intervals? Have you ever trained on your sprint form? Are you just going to go for it and see what happens? Or are you just going to get on a bike? I mean, the back, I don't like the back posture on a bike. I have some biomechanics friends. We go back and forth about this. I would never really spend too much time on a bike. So it kind of, you could potentially put yourself in a position where you're doing an exercise you really, really hate in order to try to move this number and actually sideline other exercises you kind of did like, which were probably doing something to this number, but maybe not as, at least theoretically, as potent as what you might be adding in. So I'm trying to get the point across that if you've got a routine you like and it's already working and you're doing some weight training and you're doing some cardio, you're up beyond 99% of the people in the population. Like, you're already doing a lot. Yeah. And if your thought is like, oh my God, now you're stressing, now you're worrying, am I not doing enough? Do I need to add this to my routine? Well, hey, test it. If you're this worried about your VO2 max, test it. Where are you actually at? Is it for your age? Is it good, bad, average? What is it? Then at least from there, you have a starting point. Then at that point, if you actually want to do something different, to decide what modality you want to use for your training and what modality you want to use for your testing. And then you can see, is this changing at all? And if, and to Brad's point, it's going to change pretty quickly. It doesn't take very long. It's not like you're going to wait a year for this. A couple of months and you'll pretty much know where you're going to get to. And then you can decide, is that worth keeping in my routine? That's it. Is that worth having it in your routine? Or are you feeling like that's too much? Like, now I'm not really enjoying exercise anymore. Or now the amount of effort that took is taking away from my weight training, or it's taking away from.
That's where I was going to go with it, right? The work you have to do to increase your VO2 max is fairly strenuous, right? So there is a recovery period of time for the central nervous system. You only have 7 days in a week, right? So if VO2 max training isn't actually your number one goal, it's just something you're interested in, but you start hitting it 2 or 3 times a week, you've effectively altered your recovery times now, right? Because now you're recovering from that work, and that recovery time is time where the central nervous system needs to recover. The protein synthetic machinery in your muscles may be dampened a bit. So there are always trade-offs, right? So you really do have to think about what's going to move the needle the most for your happiness and how you look, how you perform, and your longevity. And if it is VO2 max, then it should be the top one. But if it's not, then realize that your other areas of your training or life may have to be pulled back a bit.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess I would say, where is it in the priority list? I wouldn't put it number one beyond body composition or ahead of strength training. So I would say, for me, if I were training somebody and they asked me about this and like, I really think I should do this, my first thing would be get your body weight down, and that alone improves it as per the per body weight measurement version of it. And then from there, get your muscle mass up, and that style of training will also get your bone density up, and that'll also help with like balance and these other things that matter long term. And until you have those two things kind of grooved, I wouldn't worry about specific training for VO2 max, because to me, the next step after getting your body weight in order and getting your muscle mass into a routine where you're always working on building strength, the next step is cardio at all, just some cardio, anything.
Yeah.
And then until you have that habit grooved and you're honestly doing over 100 minutes of cardio a week at some real intensity, and until you're doing that, I mean, it sounds to me like people are trying to find the shortcut by just doing a couple of 30-minute interval trainings and I'm going to live long. It's not how it works. To me, you have to have those other things in place: your body composition, strength, and some amount of steady cardio you're always doing. Then, only then, I would say, now you can get picky on how you structure your cardio for the VO2 max.
Yeah.
But if you're starting there and you don't do weights and you've got a fair bit of body fat to lose, I don't think that's kind of going backwards. Those other things I think need to be in place first.
Yeah, I would look at, I mean, it's weird how we really focus on some areas of research when it's convenient and we ignore it when it's not. So when you look at the work that's been done on blue zones and areas where people have lived a very long life, I'm familiar with the research and the books. I just don't remember VO2 max being something they even measured in those people. So now it's this new thing we're looking at, but does it supersede or sort of jump in priority to everything else we've learned? Or is it something you should add in once everything else is dialed in? Kind of like what you were saying. Right?
Well, if it's a genetic thing and you go get tested and yours is very high, maybe you just don't need to. Why bother even incorporating it into your training if it's already high? You could just be genetically kind of lucky. The blue zone people, I don't think they spent their whole life training for VO2 max.
Yeah.
I think if any of them happen to have a high VO2 max, sure. But there's other factors. I guess what I'm saying is it's not, again, it's a potential predictor, but it's not the only thing. There's a bunch of other things that matter in your life for health and longevity. And to me, even in the exercise realm, I don't really put it in the top. It's not the top three. I'm saying targeted VO2 max, like I'm doing this just for my max.
Yeah, the only way that would make sense, and I don't think we have this answer, is if someone can show me that VO2 max isn't what we're actually chasing, it's change in VO2 max. It's somehow, whether you're a 30, 40, 50, 60, even a 70, to get the health benefits, you have to jump it up by 7%. Like somehow that's the driving factor. But then that's a whole other can of worms we're opening up there. Whereas, well, now the people with really good VO2 maxes are kind of screwed because it's harder to jump that up, right? Mm-hmm. So, but if it's not percent change, then to your point, if you're already got a high VO2 max, you're good. If that's the case. So, yeah.
Right. So there's I don't know. I hope that helps people think through what to do with this information if you feel like it's something you have to do. I guess my main concern was don't jeopardize the workout you're already doing. And
that's a great way to word it. And remember that all of a sudden jumping into a VO2 max training routine, especially if you're thinking about just throwing on your shoes and going for a run, you can end up like John and you just have plantar fasciitis, right? Like something that will then inhibit your training for months to come. Mm-hmm. So it's a very slippery slope, I think is the word I want to use, where even if you decide you do want to get into it, it's almost like, hey, I got to walk, I got to jog, I got to jog a bit farther. Like there is a very long progression, kind of similar to if you decide you all of a sudden want to squat 315 pounds, you just don't load a bar up and start squatting, right? You have to work your way into it, which might just be weeks of mobility work before you even do that. So same idea there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we got to wrap this one up. So the takeaway message is, does it fit in? Do you have the time to even fit it into your routine? Do you even know what your max is? If not, can you test it? Are you even going to bother testing it? And if you find out it's low, are you going to do some kind of extra work to try to improve it? And do you have an eye to your body weight there, because body weight has something to do with it? And are you going to commit to that for, I don't know, however long? Like, is this just a thing you do, or is it going to be a little thing you do for a bit and you just don't do it anymore? So all of those things are factors that you got to think about if you're going to honestly put effort into trying to move this one number on top of or in replacement of something you're already doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I mean, really, I guess it's not actually the athletic aspect of it they're chasing. It's the long-term effect it has on health, even then, right? So yeah, you'd have to prioritize it based on just what you just said, on everything else going on first, and then figure out where it fits in.
Right. And then are you going to measure it for the next, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 years, however old you are?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot to think about there. I guess, yeah. I mean, don't let it derail your workout, and stick to your weight training routine if you're already doing it. And if you're not weight training, I would do that first before I would start getting into VO2 max training.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah. All right. I think that's a good place to leave it. Oh, by the way, if you're listening and you have any other questions or comments about this particular topic, let us know in the comments section. We also set up an email address now. So it's philifeshow@gmail.com. So PHILIFE show@gmail.com. And send us show topics, comments about this, or anything you want us to talk about. We'll for sure we'll use it as a show topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So Perfect. For Brad Pilon, I'm John Barbin, and that's your Phi Life Podcast.